Welcome back. We're going to look at some of the GI accessory organs. It says pancreas, liver, and gallbladder. In reality, we're going to be looking at salivary glands, pancreas today, and then on this show, and then liver and gallbladder on the subsequent one. These are accessory organs, meaning they're not actually things that are traveling, having the food or the chyme travel through them, like we talked about on the last set of videos here. These are the ones that are going to secrete different things that help or aid in digestion and are part of the digestive process, but do not actually have a food bolus or chyme traveling through them. So salivary glands are going to be the first thing we talk about. We're going to see that we have three different sets of salivary glands, some here, some along here, and then under the tongue. Secrete saliva, slightly different types depending on the type of gland. We'll talk about those with the mouth on this one. The pancreas is another one here. It makes some different digestive enzymes. We've talked about it a little bit already with the endocrine system. The liver, highly involved in the metabolism of carbs, lipids, proteins. Makes a lot of your different blood proteins. Digestively, it secretes bile. Also gets rid of a lot of different drugs or toxins, things we can ingest like alcohol. And the gallbladder is involved in storing and secreting that bile into the digestive system. So the salivary glands, these are going to produce saliva. We're going to see that there is three main types of these ones, but saliva in general is mainly water, a little bit of a protein called mucin. And then we're going to see there is an enzyme present in there that's involved in starting to break down starches called amylase, or salivary amylase in this case. Then we have some different antibodies, some electrolytes, and other enzymes like lysozyme that are helping to prevent bacterial infection. Really, a lot of this is about moistening that food and making it into a bolus that is easier to swallow. If you've ever ate something that's really, really dry and it's hard to swallow it, that's because you need a lot more moisture in order to get it to form into a bolus and stick to itself and not to you. Lysozyme and antibodies are about that preventing microbial infection, and like I said, that amylase is all about initiating digestion of starches. So it's starting to do a little bit of what is called chemical digestion, breaking some chemical bonds in starches to more simple sugars. We have these secretory cells that are arranged into like what we've seen a few times with these different glands, these acini, these circular structures with a lumen in the center. They're going to make their secretion and dump it out in there, and like it says there, these are basophilic staining cells, so more of that purple on there. We also have what are called mucus acini. These are more pale staining, more mucus versus the more watery secretion of the serous acini. These go into what is called intercalated ducts that have simple cuboidal epithelium that are going to lead to larger ducts that are going to take this to the oral cavity. We're going to see some antibodies are made in this. These are actually the type called IgA. These are in glandular secretions, things like saliva, breast milk, things like that. And we do have these contractile epithelial cells, those myoepithelial cells that are going to help move this along. So the largest gland is what is called the parotid gland. They're actually right in front of your ear, and kind of right where your masseter muscle would be, right along here in front of the ear. If you've ever thought about eating something sour and sometimes you get that in your cheeks, that is actually your parotid glands probably contracting. They enter the oral cavity back by your molars. And we're going to see the acini in these ones are mainly serous acini, so more of that liquidy type, less of the mucus acini. So they're going to stain generally a lot darker. Like it says there, as you get older, you're going to see more and more adipocytes as we go. The main thing is you can see here is these serous acini. They're staining that darker purple on this one. We're going to see next the sublingual glands. Those are the ones that are directly under the tongue. If you've accidentally ever squirted saliva out, that's probably from the sublingual gland. These ones are almost all mucus acini. So you can see on these ones, very little stain present on them. And again, more adipocytes as you get older. Where the submandibular, it is really a little bit more of a combination of both. These are along the mandible here. It contains a little bit of both. And on those ones, you can see that on the bottom here. You can see the dark staining structures along with these lighter staining mucus acini and those areas here. So to me, being able to look at some of these different ones, and we'll look at each of these glands if I have the digital slides for them, and again, being able to tell apart a mucus acini from a serous acini. Maybe on these ones, knowing which gland contains which is another big idea on this one. Parotid, mainly serous acini, sublingual, mainly mucus acini, and then that sublingual is the combination of both. The other organ that we're going to take a look at is the pancreas. So the pancreas is a retroperitoneal organ right along the back wall. It's going to dump its contents in the first section of the duodenum there that we talked about already. We know already about the endocrine structures on there. We talked about those islets of Langerhans, or those pancreatic islets, and looked at those. It's going to be another part of this test, actually. Was the endocrine that I started all this stuff with. The exocrine pancreas, which is most of the pancreas, secretes digestive juices. Two main secretions. One that is a really bicarb-rich fluid, so an alkaline fluid that helps to neutralize the contents from the stomach that are very acidic when they're entering the duodenum, because it does not have that protective mucus in the duodenum. The other thing they have is a second secretion that has enzymes that are really involved in breaking down most of our macromolecules. So it has amylases, proteases, nucleases, lipases, all those things that are going to help us break down our different nutrients. I always kind of say it looks like the Red Wing symbol, kind of the winged wheel. Being from Michigan originally, that's my hockey team. But you can kind of see here, bigger head of the pancreas, and then it goes out to a tail. And if you've ever seen the Red Wing symbol, or if you're bored and want to look it up, you'll see it's kind of circular wheel here, and then a wing going out, kind of like what this looks like. There is some main pancreatic ducts that are traveling through this. And again, you can see another drawing of it right here. So again, you can see head of the pancreas, tail going out here. We're going to see that there's a duct traveling along the center of this, as you can see right there. And what we have is we're going to have a lot of these what are called pancreatic acini that are going to be making these different secretions that are going to be emptied into this pancreatic duct. Again, completely separate of what we looked at with the endocrine system, which were those specialized islets of Langerhans cells that were not part of this digestive process. So it has a capsule surrounding it. It is subdivided into different lobules. Like I said, we talked about the pancreatic islets already, but the exocrine pancreas is going to have these serous acini, no mucus cells, so there's going to be a lot of these dark staining circular cells here. And again, a number of different types of ducts that I'm not going to have you try to differentiate the different duct types, but knowing the pancreas, knowing those acini cells and what they would be making is something that's important here. But these are going to be putting a lot of these secretions into the duodenum along with the gallbladder and the liver to help us be able to digest all the nutrients that we take in, get them to absorbable form so the rest of the small intestine can absorb that, and we can take it into our body and use that for raw materials for our different cellular functions. And this is kind of showing you these different lobules and how it's kind of broken down into each of these things here. Again, not super worried about the different ones in terms of the lobules or the different duct types. Overall, if you're looking at a pancreas, you can see how it is kind of separated into different, have these septa in here, and you can see these little lobe structures that are going on here. As we zoom in a little bit more, you can see a lot of that purple staining. You can also see a few of them on there of the different pancreatic islets that we've talked about. For this chapter, we're not worried as much about those. We've seen these, we know what they're doing. We're worried more about the stuff surrounding these ones, these pancreatic acini that are right here. And you can see much darker staining, that basophilic staining that we see with those serous acini. So you see these serous acinar cells, again, taking up more of that purple stain, that basophilic stain. What are they making? Well, it's like I said, a lot of different enzymes. They make lipases that are going to break down fat. They make something called pancreatic amylase that breaks down carbs, very similar to the salivary amylase. They make a couple different nucleases. Outside of that, they make a protease called prohormone or enzyme called trypsinogen, that once it gets into the intestine, it is converted to trypsin, and this is a protease that can clip different amino acid sequences, as well as activate some other proteases that will allow us to break down these proteins to their basic subunits. And what makes the pancreas secrete its hormones is, it's again that we don't get into it much in histology, but there's this endocrine interplay that's going on here. The stomach makes something called gastrin. It can influence what's going on in the intestines a little bit, also acts back on the stomach. When we start getting chyme from the stomach going into the duodenum, it has a couple of hormones called secretin and cholecystokinin, which is shortened to usually to CCK. These duodenal cells can release that. It is going to tell the stomach to kind of tone down its actions, but that secretin also stimulates the pancreas to release that bicarbonate-rich fluid. The CCK tells it to release those different enzymes, which are going to start acting on the stuff that's there. The other thing that we'll see the CCK does is it actually acts on the gallbladder to cause the gallbladder to contract and release bile, which we will talk about in the subsequent show here with these different accessory organs. So this is showing you how these acinar cells are surrounding these ducts, and you have these cuboidal ducts that are going to be taking this stuff down to that main pancreatic duct and out into the duodenum. You can actually see a duct here. To me, pancreas, being able to identify the pancreas, knowing that those pancreatic acini and their serous cells, that is what I'm expecting you to be able to know on this one. But you can see some of these ducts traveling through there. And if I see one on the little digital slide that I'm doing, I'll try to point it out on there. Again, not something I think I'm going to make you identify relative to the rest of the pancreas with as much stuff as we have that we can look at on this. And you can see, again, each of these cuboidal ducts, how they look different than those serous acini. The staining of the cells is a little bit different. So what we'll do is we'll look at some slides of this stuff real quick, the digital slides of the pancreas and the different salivary glands. We will then do the liver and gallbladder, and then we'll be moving on to the urinary system after that. What we're going to look at here real quick is we're going to look at the three different types of salivary glands. I'll kind of point out the differences between those, and then we'll go and take a look at the pancreas. I'm going to try to do them in the same order that we talked about them in the show here. So the first one we're looking at here, this is actually the parotid salivary gland. I'm going to zoom in on this a little bit. The main thing you can see on these ones here, if we get into the tissues out here, is if we zoom in on this one, you can see it's mainly that dark staining. So you can see the adipose tissue in there around here. These are going to be all those serous acini. You can see how they're much darker staining mixed in between that fat here in all these different areas. And if we move around, you can see there's some duct cells and things like that. But the main thing you see is all these are pretty dark staining with some adipose mixed in between. The next one that we talked about in the show here was the sublingual gland. So you can see here is the sublingual gland zoomed out on it. And in this one, if we zoom in on it, the main thing you notice here is all these acini, they don't have much staining in here. So these are those mucus acini that are much later staining. So all these areas where I'm pointing at with the cursor here, those are all those mucus acini where you can see the gland is almost entirely that. So parotid gland, mainly the serous acini, the dark staining on each of those little structures. The sublingual gland, it's almost all mucus acini, so you don't see much staining in each of those ones. And then the third gland that we're going to look at is that sublingual gland. Let me move back out on this just a bit here. And on this one, you can see that there's a combination of both. You can see serous acini over here, mucus acini over here, and you can see that they are kind of, if I go different area to different area, that there is both in here. So again, you can see it even right here. Serous acini here, mucus acini over in this area where you see the different staining colors on each of those ones. So to me on this stuff, knowing what is a mucus acini versus a serous acini, fair game. Knowing that the different glands and what their basic structure and what types of acini they have, also fair game. The last slide I want to show you is the pancreas. So here is the entire pancreas right here. You can see rather dark staining going back to more of that serous acini. If we zoom in on it a little bit here, I can point out a couple different things. We've looked at these structures before, so here and here, those would be those endocrine functions there. But if we zoom in on this a little bit more, you can see all the different little serous acini. These are all those pancreatic acini that are in here. And again, as you age, a little bit more adipose tissue is going to come into this stuff. If we looked around a little more, we could probably find a good duct on this stuff. I'm not so worried that you know the ducts, but again, you can see all these serous acini of the pancreas found throughout. Really, that's not much else to show in terms of the structure of that. You can see a blood vessel right there. So really, I think that's pretty sufficient. I would expect you on this one to be able to identify the pancreas, know its serous acini, have an understanding of what that pancreas makes.